Question 1. Consider an organization certified to ISO 37001-2016 that, during a surveillance audit, a significant nonconformity is identified relating to inadequate due diligence procedures for third parties operating in high-risk jurisdictions, leading to a potential exposure to bribery risks. Certification body's report emphasizes that this nonconformity indicates a potential breakdown in the ABM's effectiveness in meeting the requirements of Clause 7. 2. 3. Due diligence. What is the primary objective for the organization in responding to this type of finding to ensure the continuation of its certification? Option A. Focus solely on updating the documented procedures for due diligence to reflect best practices, without necessarily implementing or verifying the effectiveness of the changes in practice. Option B. Immediately suspend all third-party engagements in high-risk jurisdictions until a complete overhaul of the due diligence process can be completed and re-verified by an independent internal audit. Option C. Submit a detailed proposal for a revised due diligence framework to the certification body for pre-approval before any corrective actions are initiated, ensuring alignment with future audit expectations. Option D. Demonstrate through documented evidence that effective corrective actions have been implemented to address the root cause of the nonconformity, and that the ABMS is capable of achieving its intended outcomes, thereby preventing recurrence. The correct answer is D. Demonstrate through documented evidence that effective corrective actions have been implemented to address the root cause of the nonconformity, and that the ABMS is capable of achieving its intended outcomes, thereby preventing recurrence. Explanation. Maintaining certification to ISO 37001-2016 requires ongoing vigilance and adaptation of the anti-bribery management system ABMS. Clause 10, improvement, is critical here. Specifically 10. 1. Nonconformity and corrective action mandates that the organization shall react to any nonconformity, including those arising from audits or reviews, by taking action to control and correct it, and by examining the cause of the nonconformity to prevent recurrence. Clause 10. 2. Continual improvement requires the organization to continually improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the ABMS. This involves using the results of audits, performance evaluations, and corrective actions to identify opportunities for improvement. Therefore, when a certification body identifies a significant nonconformity during a surveillance audit that points to a systemic failure in the ABM's ability to prevent bribery, the organization must not only address the immediate issue, but also implement robust corrective actions that demonstrate the system's capacity for sustained effectiveness and prevent future occurrences. This often involves a thorough root cause analysis and a revision of procedures, training, or controls. The effectiveness of these corrective actions is then assessed in subsequent audits. Question 2. Following a comprehensive risk assessment that identified a significant vulnerability in managing third-party relationships, a manufacturing firm specializing in international trade is updating its ISO 37001-2016 compliant anti-bribery management system. The assessment highlighted that certain overseas agents, compensated via commission, often incur substantial expenses that are not always adequately substantiated by detailed receipts or clear business justifications. To strengthen its operational controls and align with the standards requirements for preventing bribery through financial transactions and third-party dealings, which combination of financial and non-financial control enhancements would be most effective in this specific context? Option A. Introduce a blanket prohibition on all commission-based payments to overseas agents and mandate that all business development activities be conducted internally by company employees, while simultaneously reducing the scope of due diligence to only focus on agents operating in high-risk jurisdictions. Option B. Implement a mandatory tiered approval matrix for all agent commission payments exceeding a predefined threshold, requiring detailed supporting documentation, including itemized invoices and proof of service delivery, alongside a revised due diligence protocol for all new and existing agents that includes verification of their business reputation and anti-bribery compliance history. Option C. Increase the frequency of internal audits focused solely on expense reimbursements for all employees, irrespective of their role in third-party engagements, and develop a new company-wide policy on ethical gift-giving that broadly prohibits any form of gratuity. Option D. Establish a simplified expense reporting system for agents that relies on self-certification with minimal documentation, and discontinue the practice of background checks for third parties, arguing that such measures are overly burdensome and detract from operational efficiency. The correct answer is B. Implement a mandatory tiered approval matrix for all agent commission payments exceeding a predefined threshold, requiring detailed supporting documentation, including itemized invoices and proof of service delivery, alongside a revised due diligence protocol for all new and existing agents that includes verification of their business reputation and anti-bribery compliance history. Explanation: when transitioning to ISO 37001, 2016, an organization must ensure that its financial and non-financial controls are robust and integrated into its anti-bribery management system, ABAMS. Clause 8. 3 of the standard specifically addresses the need for controls over financial transactions and the associated record keeping. This includes ensuring that all payments are properly authorized, documented, and for legitimate business purposes, preventing the misuse of funds for bribery. Non-financial controls are equally crucial. These can encompass a wide range of activities such as due diligence on business associates, clear policies on gifts, hospitality and expenses, and robust complaint handling mechanisms. The effectiveness of these controls is often assessed through internal audits and management reviews, as mandated by Clauses 9 and 10 respectively. For example, a financial control might involve a two-person approval process for any expenditure exceeding a certain threshold, with the second approver verifying the business justification and ensuring no illicit intent. A non-financial control could be the mandatory declaration of all gifts received by employees above a nominal value, which are then reviewed by the compliance department. The transition process requires a thorough risk assessment. Clause 6. 1. To identify where bribery risks are most likely to occur within the organization's operations, thereby guiding the selection and implementation of appropriate financial and non-financial controls. The focus is on creating a system where financial records accurately reflect business activities and where non-financial procedures proactively mitigate opportunities for bribery. Question 3. During the initial phase of transitioning to an ISO 37001, 2016 compliant anti-bribery management system, a multinational corporation, Globex Corp., operating in diverse jurisdictions with varying levels of corruption risk and differing legal enforcement capacities, needs to establish its organizational context. Which of the following actions would most effectively address the requirement for understanding the organization and its context, as per Clause 4? 1 of the standard, considering Globex Corp's complex operating environment and the overarching goal of preventing bribery. Option A. Prioritize the development of training materials for employees on anti-bribery principles, deferring a detailed analysis of the external environment until after the initial system implementation to streamline the transition process. Option B. Focus solely on internal organizational policies and procedures, ensuring they are updated to reflect the principles of ISO 37001-2016, with minimal external environmental scanning to avoid diluting internal efforts. Option C. Engage external consultants to perform a general compliance audit against the ISO 37001-2016 standard, assuming that their external perspective will inherently capture all necessary contextual factors without further internal analysis. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that specifically identifies and analyzes bribery risks across all operational jurisdictions, considering local laws, enforcement trends, and socio-economic factors, and integrate these findings into the design of the anti-bribery controls and procedures. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that specifically identifies and analyzes bribery risks across all operational jurisdictions, considering local laws, enforcement trends, and socio-economic factors, and integrate these findings into the design of the anti-bribery controls and procedures. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough understanding of the organization's context, as stipulated in Clause 4. 1. This involves identifying external and internal issues relevant to the organization's purpose and its strategic direction, as well as its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the anti-bribery management system. These issues can include legal and regulatory frameworks, economic conditions, technological advancements, social and cultural factors, and the competitive landscape. Additionally, internal issues such as organizational culture, governance structures, financial resources, and human capital capabilities must be considered. The standard emphasizes that this understanding should inform the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the anti-bribery management system. Therefore, a comprehensive analysis of these factors is crucial for tailoring the system to the organization's specific operational environment and risk profile, ensuring its effectiveness in preventing, detecting, and responding to bribery. This proactive approach, rooted in understanding the organization and its context, is foundational to a robust anti-bribery framework, and compliance with relevant anti-bribery legislation such as the UK Bribery Act or the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Question 4. When assessing the readiness of an organization to transition to ISO 37001-2016, which aspect of Clause 4? 1. Understanding the organization and its context is most critical for establishing the foundational elements of an effective anti-bribery management system. Option A. Documenting a comprehensive list of all interested parties and their specific anti-bribery expectations. Option B. Developing a detailed operational plan for implementing anti-bribery controls across all business units. Option C. Identifying and analyzing both internal and external factors that can affect the organization's ability to achieve the intended outcomes of its anti-bribery management system. Option D. Establishing a clear and unambiguous anti-bribery policy statement endorsed by top management. The correct answer is C. Identifying and analyzing both internal and external factors that can affect the organization's ability to achieve the intended outcomes of its anti-bribery management system. Explanation: the transition from an existing anti-bribery framework to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough gap analysis. Clause 4. 1 of ISO 37001-2016, understanding the organization and its context, mandates that the organization determines external and internal issues relevant to its purpose and its ability to achieve the intended results of its anti-bribery management system. These issues can impact the effectiveness of the system and must be monitored and reviewed. Clause 4. 2. Understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties requires identifying interested parties and their relevant requirements concerning anti-bribery. Clause 5. Leadership and commitment emphasizes top management's responsibility in establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving the anti-bribery management system. Clause 5.2. Policy requires a documented anti-bribery policy. Clause 5.3. Organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities ensures clarity on who is accountable for what within the system. Clause 6.1.1. Actions to address risks and opportunities requires identifying and assessing bribery risks and opportunities and planning actions to address them. Clause 6.1.2. Anti-bribery objectives and planning to achieve them sets measurable objectives. Clause 7.1. Resources deals with providing necessary resources. Clause 7.2. Competence ensures personnel are competent. Clause 7.3. Awareness focuses on raising awareness. Clause 7.4. Communication establishes internal and external communication processes. Clause 7.5. Documented information covers document control. Clause 8.1. Operational planning and control addresses the implementation of processes. Clause 8.2. Bribery risk assessment is a critical clause for identifying and assessing bribery risks. Clause 8.3. Due diligence focuses on applying due diligence to associates. Clause 8.4. Controls establishes and implements controls. Clause 8.5. Communications and training covers communication and training programs. Clause 8.6. Reporting channels ensures mechanisms for reporting concerns. Clause 8.7. Monitoring, measurement, analysis, and review tracks system performance. Clause 8.8. Internal audit verifies conformity. Clause 8.9. Management review assesses system suitability and effectiveness. Clause 9.1. Nonconformity and corrective action addresses issues. Clause 9.2. Continual improvement drives enhancements. The transition process involves understanding how the organization's current practices align with these requirements and identifying any gaps that need to be addressed. Comprehensive understanding of the organization's context, including its operational environment, legal and regulatory landscape, and stakeholder expectations, is fundamental to effectively implementing and transitioning to ISO 37001-2016. This foundational understanding informs the subsequent risk assessments, policy development, and control implementation necessary for a successful transition. Question 5. An international conglomerate, Global Reach Enterprises, is undergoing a transition to ISO 37001-2016. During their risk assessment, they identified a practice where their country managers in emerging markets frequently provide significant financial contributions to local charities and community development projects, often at the request of influential local officials. While these contributions are publicly framed as corporate social responsibility, internal audits have noted that these payments often coincide with periods where Global Reach seeking favorable regulatory treatment or contract renewals. The nature of these contributions, their timing relative to business objectives, and the involvement of local officials in directing these funds raise concerns about their alignment with the standard's definition of bribery. What specific element of the ISO 37001-2016 definition of bribery is most critically challenged by this scenario? Option A. The offering, giving, receiving, or soliciting of an undue advantage to influence the performance of a relevant function. Option B. The mere existence of a policy prohibiting the acceptance of gifts, regardless of the intent behind the action. Option C. The direct exchange of money for a specific favorable action or decision by a public official. Option D. The provision of customary and reasonable business courtesies that do not carry the intent to improperly influence. Correct answer is A. The offering, giving, receiving, or soliciting of an undue advantage to influence the performance of a relevant function. Explanation. The core of ISO 37001-2016's definition of bribery lies in the offering, giving, receiving, or soliciting of an undue advantage. This advantage is provided to influence the performance of a relevant function. The intent behind the act is crucial. It aims to secure an improper advantage. A relevant function refers to any duty or activity performed by a person acting in any public or private capacity. An undue advantage is something that is not legally or contractually owed. The standard emphasizes that bribery can occur in various forms, not just monetary payments. This can include gifts, hospitality, favors, or anything of value that exceeds reasonable and customary levels. The key is that it is given with the intent to influence decision-making or gain an unfair benefit. Understanding this broad scope is essential for establishing and maintaining an effective anti-bribery management system. The standard differentiates between legitimate business courtesies and bribery by focusing on the intent and the impropriety of the advantage. For example, a small, customary gift given without any expectation of influence is unlikely to be considered bribery, whereas a substantial payment made to a government official to expedite a permit application clearly falls under the definition. Question 6. When an organization is migrating its existing anti-bribery compliance program to align with the ISO 37001-2016 standard, what is the most critical initial activity to undertake to ensure a systematic and effective transition? Option A. Prioritize the implementation of a bribery prevention policy for all third-party intermediaries. Option B. Immediately commence training all personnel on the principles of ISO 37001-2016 without prior assessment. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive gap analysis of the current anti-bribery program against all clauses of ISO 37001-2016. Option D. Develop a new, standalone anti-bribery policy that supersedes all previous related policies. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive gap analysis of the current anti-bribery program against all clauses of ISO 37001-2016. Explanation. The transition from an existing anti-bribery framework to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough gap analysis to identify areas where the current system falls short of the standard's requirements. This analysis is foundational for planning the transition. Following the gap analysis, a comprehensive transition plan is developed, outlining the steps, resources, and timelines needed to implement the standard. This plan should address all clauses of ISO 37001, including the establishment of an anti-bribery policy, risk assessment, due diligence, controls, training, and monitoring. The development of new or revised procedures and controls is a critical output of this planning phase, ensuring that the organization's anti-bribery management system, ABAMS, aligns with the standard. The subsequent implementation of these revised procedures, coupled with ongoing monitoring and review, forms the core of the transition process. Internal audits and management reviews are essential for verifying the effectiveness of the implemented ABAMs and identifying areas for continuous improvement, ultimately leading to certification. Therefore, the most crucial initial step in transitioning to ISO 37001-2016, after understanding the standard's requirements, is the detailed assessment of the current state against the standard's clauses to inform the subsequent planning and implementation. Question 7. Consider an international conglomerate, Globex Corp., which is transitioning to ISO 37001-2016. Globex operates in over 50 countries, including those with varying levels of corruption perception indices and legal frameworks for anti-bribery. Internally, the company has a history of rapid growth through acquisitions, leading to diverse corporate cultures and varying levels of financial transparency across its subsidiaries. During the context analysis for its anti-bribery management system, which of the following represents the most comprehensive and interconnected set of issues that Globex must address as per Clause 4? 1 of the standard. Option A. The varying legal enforcement of anti-bribery laws across its operating jurisdictions and the inconsistent application of financial reporting standards among its acquired subsidiaries. Option B. The increasing trend of corporate social responsibility reporting by competitors and the recent appointment of a new chief financial officer with limited experience in international finance. Option C. The global economic downturn affecting market demand for its products and the company's internal IT infrastructure's capacity to handle new compliance software. Option D. The fluctuating exchange rates impacting its overseas profits and the need for enhanced employee training programs on general ethical conduct. The correct answer is A. The varying legal enforcement of anti-bribery laws across its operating jurisdictions and the inconsistent application of financial reporting standards among its acquired subsidiaries. Explanation. The transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough understanding of the organization's context. Clause 4. 1. Understanding the organization and its context mandates the determination of external and internal issues that are relevant to the organization's purpose and its ability to achieve the intended outcome of its anti-bribery management system. These issues can significantly impact the effectiveness of the system. External issues include the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental (PESEL) factors, as well as market conditions, competitive landscape, and stakeholder expectations. For instance, operating in a jurisdiction with weak anti-corruption enforcement is an external issue that increases bribery risk. Internal issues relate to the organization's culture, governance structure, operational processes, financial resources, and human capital. A decentralized decision-making process without adequate oversight could be an internal issue that heightens the risk of bribery. Identifying these issues informs the scope and design of the anti-bribery management system, including risk assessments and control implementation. For example, if a company frequently engages third-party agents in high-risk countries, this fact must be considered an internal operational characteristic that, when combined with the external legal environment of those countries, shapes the specific controls needed. The identification process is iterative and ongoing, ensuring the system remains relevant and effective in managing bribery risks. Question 8. A multinational corporation, transitioning to ISO 37001-2016, is conducting its initial awareness training for employees involved in international procurement. The training aims to instill a strong ethical foundation. Considering the nuances of global business interactions and the standard's emphasis on a robust anti-bribery culture, which of the following training components would most effectively address the ethical considerations in business dealings and prepare personnel for potential dilemmas? Option A. Detailed case studies analyzing hypothetical scenarios involving facilitation payments in countries with differing legal interpretations, alongside role-playing exercises to practice navigating these situations ethically and in compliance with the organization's policy and relevant laws like the FCPA and UK Bribery Act. Option B. Explanation of the organization's code of conduct and its general principles of integrity, without specific examples of how to apply these principles in complex international business transactions. Option C. A review of historical bribery cases and their severe legal and financial repercussions for individuals and organizations, presented as a cautionary lecture. Option D, a comprehensive overview of the ISO 37001-2016 standards clauses and subclauses, focusing on the procedural requirements for record keeping and due diligence on third parties. Correct answer is A. Detailed case studies analyzing hypothetical scenarios involving facilitation payments in countries with differing legal interpretations, alongside role-playing exercises to practice navigating these situations ethically and in compliance with the organization's policy and relevant laws like the FCPA and UK Bribery Act. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to demonstrate a commitment to ethical conduct and to implement controls that prevent bribery. Clause 7.2 of the standard, Awareness and Training, mandates that all personnel with responsibilities within the anti-bribery management system and relevant personnel receive appropriate awareness and training. This training should cover the organization's anti-bribery policy, procedures, the concept of bribery and its consequences, and the specific roles and responsibilities in preventing and detecting bribery. The ethical considerations in business dealings are directly addressed by ensuring that personnel understand the why behind the anti-bribery measures, not just the what. This includes fostering a culture where ethical behavior is valued and expected, and where employees feel empowered to report concerns without fear of reprisal. The principle of tone at the top is crucial here, as leadership must visibly champion ethical conduct. Furthermore, understanding the legal and regulatory landscape, such as the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act (FCPA) or the UK Bribery Act, is vital for personnel to grasp the gravity of noncompliance and the ethical imperative to adhere to the standard. The training must be tailored to the specific risks an organization faces, considering its industry, geographic locations, and business relationships. Question 9. Globex Industries, a large-scale manufacturing conglomerate with operations spanning multiple continents, is undertaking its transition to ISO 37001-2016. Beyond its own employees, shareholders, and direct customers, which combination of interested parties would be most crucial for Globex to consider when defining the scope and objectives of its anti-bribery management system, given the varying legal frameworks and enforcement priorities across its operational regions? Option A. International regulatory bodies in key operating jurisdictions, critical upstream suppliers with significant leverage, and influential anti-corruption advocacy groups. Option B. Competitors in unrelated market segments, former clients who terminated contracts for non-bribery reasons, and unrelated industry associations with no direct oversight. Option C. Local community leaders in areas with minimal direct business interaction, academic researchers studying general business ethics, and past employees with minor grievances. Option D. Internal audit staff not directly involved in compliance, external marketing agencies focused solely on brand perception, and software vendors providing generic IT solutions. The correct answer is A. International regulatory bodies in key operating jurisdictions, critical upstream suppliers with significant leverage, and influential anti-corruption advocacy groups. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough understanding of the needs and expectations of interested parties as mandated by Clause 4.2. This involves identifying individuals or groups who can be affected by, or perceive themselves to be affected by the organization's anti-bribery management system. For a multinational manufacturing firm like Globex Industries, key interested parties extend beyond direct employees and shareholders. Regulatory bodies in various jurisdictions, e.g., the U.S. Department of Justice, the UK Serious Fraud Office, have significant expectations regarding compliance and enforcement. Business partners, including suppliers and distributors, are critical as they can either facilitate or hinder anti-bribery efforts, and their own compliance levels impact the organization's risk profile. Non-governmental organizations, NGO, focused on corporate transparency and anti-corruption, also represent an important stakeholder group whose scrutiny and advocacy can influence public perception and regulatory action. Furthermore, the general public and media can have expectations concerning ethical business conduct, especially in sectors with high public visibility. Therefore, determining the needs and expectations of these diverse groups requires a systematic approach that considers legal obligations, contractual requirements, and broader ethical and reputational considerations. The process involves not just listening to stated demands, but also anticipating potential concerns and understanding the influence each party wields. Question 10. A multinational corporation operating in sectors with high bribery risks is transitioning to ISO 37001-2016. To enhance its anti-bribery management system, the organization is designing its reporting mechanisms for suspected bribery. Considering the standard's emphasis on accessibility and non-retaliation, which of the following combinations of reporting channels would best align with the principles of ISO 37001-2016, ensuring comprehensive coverage and encouraging reporting? Option A. A single point of contact within the legal department who is responsible for receiving all reports, with a policy that discourages anonymous reporting to facilitate investigations. Option B. A suggestion box located in the main cafeteria, with a notice that all reports will be reviewed by the CEO during quarterly board meetings, and no specific provisions for confidentiality. Option C. An open-door policy for all line managers to receive reports, with an expectation that managers will directly address any suspected bribery without formal documentation, unless a formal complaint is lodged. Option D. A dedicated confidential hotline managed by a third party, an internal ethics committee with a clear escalation process, and an anonymous online portal accessible via the company intranet and external website. The correct answer is D. A dedicated confidential hotline managed by a third party, an internal ethics committee with a clear escalation process, and an anonymous online portal accessible via the company intranet and external website. Explanation. The core principle behind establishing multiple reporting channels for suspected bribery under ISO 37001-2016 is to ensure that individuals who witness or suspect bribery have accessible, confidential, and safe avenues to report such concerns without fear of reprisal. Clause 8.3 of the standard explicitly mandates the establishment of such mechanisms. These channels should cater to different preferences and levels of comfort among potential reporters. For instance, some individuals might prefer to report anonymously, while others might be comfortable reporting directly to a designated person or department. The standard emphasizes that these channels must be clearly communicated to all personnel and relevant external parties. The effectiveness of these mechanisms is evaluated through periodic reviews and audits to ensure they are understood, utilized, and that reports are handled appropriately and without prejudice. The goal is to foster a culture of integrity and encourage the proactive identification and remediation of bribery risks. Therefore, the most comprehensive approach to reporting mechanisms involves providing a variety of options that address anonymity, direct reporting, and accessibility, thereby maximizing the likelihood of reports being made and acted upon. Question 11. A multinational corporation, Global Reach Solutions, has historically operated with a robust internal code of conduct that prohibits bribery and has conducted periodic awareness training for its employees. Upon deciding to formally implement an ISO 37001-2016 compliant anti-bribery management system, what is the most appropriate initial strategic approach for Global Reach Solutions to adopt regarding its existing anti-bribery framework? Option A. Immediately discard all prior anti-bribery policies and procedures and design a completely new system from the ground up to ensure full compliance with ISO 37001-2016. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive gap analysis to identify areas where existing practices align with and deviate from ISO 37001-2016 requirements, and then develop a plan to address identified deficiencies. Option C. Focus solely on implementing the new clauses introduced by ISO 37001-2016, assuming that existing anti-bribery measures are already sufficient. Option D. Prioritize external legal counsel to draft all new anti-bribery documentation, bypassing any review of current internal controls. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive gap analysis to identify areas where existing practices align with and deviate from ISO 37001-2016 requirements, and then develop a plan to address identified deficiencies. Explanation. When transitioning to ISO 37001-2016, an organization must consider how to integrate its existing anti-bribery controls and policies with the requirements of the standard. Clause 10, improvement, specifically addresses the need for continual improvement of the anti-bribery management system. This involves evaluating the effectiveness of existing measures and identifying areas for enhancement. For an organization that has previously implemented anti-bribery controls, the transition process is not about starting from scratch, but rather about aligning these existing practices with the systematic approach mandated by ISO 37001. This includes documenting procedures, establishing clear roles and responsibilities, conducting risk assessments, implementing controls, providing training, and setting up monitoring and review mechanisms. The standard emphasizes a risk-based approach, meaning that the resources and controls should be proportionate to the identified bribery risks. Therefore, an organization should leverage its prior experience in combating bribery to inform its risk assessment and control design under ISO 37001, rather than discarding all previous efforts. The transition requires a thorough gap analysis to understand where existing controls meet the standard's requirements and where new or modified controls are needed. Question 12. When undertaking a transition to an ISO 37001-2016 compliant anti-bribery management system, what is the most critical initial step in the gap analysis process concerning legal and regulatory requirements? Option A. Identifying and evaluating all applicable anti-bribery laws and regulations in all relevant jurisdictions of operation. Option B. Implementing a global code of conduct that explicitly prohibits all forms of facilitation payments, regardless of local custom. Option C. Developing a comprehensive training program that covers all potential bribery scenarios identified in hypothetical case studies. Option D. Establishing a robust whistleblowing mechanism with guaranteed anonymity for all employees across the organization. The correct answer is A. Identifying and evaluating all applicable anti-bribery laws and regulations in all relevant jurisdictions of operation. Explanation. The transition from an existing anti-bribery program to an ISO 37001-2016 compliance system requires a thorough gap analysis. This analysis identifies areas where the current practices fall short of the standard's requirements. Clause 4.2 of ISO 37001-2016, understanding the organization and its context, mandates that the organization determine external and internal issues relevant to its purpose and its ability to achieve the intended results of the anti-bribery management system. These issues include legal and regulatory requirements. Therefore, a comprehensive review of all applicable anti-bribery laws and regulations in all jurisdictions where the organization operates is a foundational step in this gap analysis. For example, if an organization operates in the United States, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act (FCPA) would be a critical legal requirement to assess. In the United Kingdom, the Bribery Act 2010 would be paramount. Similarly, understanding local laws in countries like Brazil, Lei Anticorrupção, or China Anti-Unfair Competition Law is essential. The gap analysis should specifically evaluate how the organization's current policies, procedures, training, and controls address these identified legal obligations. The process involves not just identifying the laws, but understanding their specific prohibitions, penalties, and reporting obligations, and then comparing them against the organization's current state. This ensures that the transition process addresses all legally mandated aspects of an anti-bribery program. Question 13. When transitioning an organization's anti-bribery management system to align with ISO 37001-2016, what is the paramount consideration for updating reporting and escalation procedures to ensure continued compliance and effectiveness, particularly in light of management review requirements? Option A. Broadening the scope of mandatory reporting to include all minor policy infractions, irrespective of any suspected link to bribery, to foster a culture of absolute transparency. Option B. Implementing a new anonymous whistleblower hotline that is entirely separate from existing communication channels, regardless of its integration with other management processes. Option C. Ensuring the updated procedures facilitate the integration of findings from reported incidents into the regular management review process to assess system suitability and effectiveness. Option D. Prioritizing the development of extensive legal documentation for every reported incident, even minor ones, to preemptively address potential litigation. The correct answer is C. Ensuring the updated procedures facilitate the integration of findings from reported incidents into the regular management review process to assess system suitability and effectiveness. Explanation: the transition from an older version of an anti-bribery management system to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough review and update of existing reporting and escalation procedures. Clause 9.3 of ISO 37001-2016, Management Review, mandates that the organization's top management shall review the anti-bribery management system at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. This review must consider the performance of the system, including the outcomes of investigations into alleged bribery and the effectiveness of controls. Clause 8.7. Reporting and investigation specifies that the organization shall establish procedures for reporting suspected or actual bribery, and for investigating such reports. When transitioning, the organization must ensure that its reporting channels are accessible, confidential, and provide protection against retaliation for those who report in good faith, as required by Clause 7. 2. Competence in Clause 7. 3. Awareness. Furthermore, the escalation process must clearly define who receives reports, how they are investigated, and to whom findings and recommendations are communicated for corrective action, aligning with the management review requirements. The transition process necessitates ensuring that the updated procedures enable prompt and appropriate action, including potential legal or regulatory reporting, as dictated by applicable laws and regulations, such as the UK Bribery Act or the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, if relevant to the organization's operations. Therefore, the most critical aspect of the transition concerning reporting and escalation is the integration of these procedures with the overall management review process to confirm their ongoing suitability and effectiveness in addressing bribery risks. Question 14. A global infrastructure development company, heavily involved in large-scale projects across emerging markets with historically inconsistent anti-corruption enforcement, is undergoing its transition to ISO 37001-2016. The company has encountered internal resistance to implementing stricter controls on gift-giving and entertainment practices, which have been historically used to foster relationships with local stakeholders and government officials. Considering the sector-specific risks inherent in infrastructure development, such as the significant discretionary power held by public officials in permitting and land acquisition, and the complex web of subcontractors and agents involved in project execution, what is the most critical area of focus for the company during its ISO 37001-2016 transition to effectively mitigate bribery risks? Option A. Conducting a thorough review and update of the company's financial controls and auditing procedures to detect any unusual or suspicious transactions that might indicate bribery. Option B. Establishing a dedicated whistleblowing hotline and investigation process to encourage the reporting of suspected bribery incidents and ensure timely and thorough follow-up. Option C. Developing a comprehensive internal communication campaign to educate all employees on the company's updated code of conduct and anti-bribery policies, emphasizing the importance of ethical behavior. Option D. Enhancing the due diligence procedures for all third parties, including subcontractors, agents, and consultants, to identify and assess potential bribery risks associated with their activities and relationships. The correct answer is D. Enhancing the due diligence procedures for all third parties, including subcontractors, agents, and consultants, to identify and assess potential bribery risks associated with their activities and relationships. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 from a previously established anti-bribery framework, particularly in sectors with complex supply chains and significant government interaction, presents unique challenges. For a multinational construction firm operating in regions with varying levels of regulatory enforcement and cultural norms regarding gifts and hospitality, the primary concern during transition is ensuring that existing informal practices, often perceived as customary or necessary for business development, are rigorously re-evaluated against the standard's explicit prohibitions and due diligence requirements. Clause 8.2 of ISO 37001-2016 mandates that organizations establish and maintain procedures for due diligence on persons and business associates. In a construction context, this involves scrutinizing subcontractors, suppliers, agents, and even government officials with whom the firm interacts. The risk of bribery is amplified by the discretionary nature of permits, inspections, and contract awards in some jurisdictions. Therefore, the most critical aspect of the transition for such a firm is the robust and comprehensive due diligence process applied to all third parties, ensuring they meet the organization's anti-bribery standards and that any potential conflicts of interest or undue influence are identified and mitigated. This proactive identification and management of third-party risks directly addresses the core intent of the standard and helps prevent corrupt payments that could occur through these channels. Question 15. Considering the transition to an ISO 37001-2016 compliant anti-bribery management system, what is the most crucial initial step for an organization's top management to undertake to ensure effective implementation and alignment with the standard's intent, particularly in relation to understanding the organization's operational environment and its commitment to integrity? Option A. Allocate a dedicated budget and assign specific personnel to manage the transition project, prioritizing training for the compliance department. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of all business units and geographical locations to identify potential bribery vulnerabilities before drafting any new policies. Option C. Establish and communicate a clear, unambiguous anti-bribery policy that is demonstrably integrated with the organization's strategic objectives and operational context, ensuring top management's visible commitment. Option D. Develop detailed procedural guidelines for all employee interactions with third parties, focusing on due diligence processes and record-keeping requirements. Correct answer is C. Establish and communicate a clear, unambiguous anti-bribery policy that is demonstrably integrated with the organization's strategic objectives and operational context, ensuring top management's visible commitment. Explanation. The transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to reevaluate their existing anti-bribery policies and procedures against the requirements of the new standard. Clause 4. 2. Understanding the organization and its context is a foundational element that necessitates identifying external and internal issues relevant to the organization's purpose and its strategic direction, specifically concerning bribery risks. Clause 5. 1. Leadership and commitment mandates top management to demonstrate leadership and commitment by establishing an anti-bribery policy and ensuring it is communicated, understood, and applied throughout the organization. Clause 6. 1. General, for opportunities and risks, requires the organization to plan actions to address risks and opportunities, including those related to bribery, and to determine the necessary changes to the anti-bribery management system. Clause 7. 1. Resources requires the organization to determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the anti-bribery management system. The core of the transition involves integrating the standard's requirements into the organization's existing business processes and management systems, ensuring that the anti-bribery policy is aligned with strategic objectives and that leadership actively champions its implementation. The specific focus on demonstrating leadership commitment and integrating the policy into the organization's context and strategic direction are critical aspects of a successful transition. Question 16. Consider a scenario where an internal audit of an organization transitioning to ISO 37001-2016 reveals a nonconformity. A key sales representative failed to obtain the required pre-approval for a hospitality expense exceeding a specified threshold, as mandated by the organization's updated anti-bribery policy. The representative claims they were unaware of the new threshold and the pre-approval requirement due to a recent change in their responsibilities. The organization's management is reviewing the root cause analysis report. Which of the following approaches to addressing this nonconformity will be most effective in preventing recurrence and demonstrating robust transition management, considering the principles of ISO 37001-2016? Option A. Conducting a one-off review of the sales representative's entire expense history to identify any other potential policy breaches and documenting this review as a corrective action. Option B. Updating the expense reporting software to automatically flag and reject any expenses exceeding the threshold without prior approval, thereby enforcing compliance through technology. Option C. Implementing mandatory, role-specific refresher training on the anti-bribery policy and procedures for all sales personnel, coupled with a system-generated reminder for all expense submissions exceeding the defined threshold. Option D, issuing a formal warning to the sales representative and requiring them to resubmit the expense with the correct pre-approval, thereby reinforcing the policy's importance. Correct answer is C, implementing mandatory role-specific refresher training on the anti-bribery policy and procedures for all sales personnel, coupled with a system-generated reminder for all expense submissions exceeding the defined threshold. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires a thorough review and, where necessary, revision of existing anti-bribery policies and procedures to align with the new standards requirements. A key aspect of this transition involves identifying and addressing any nonconformities that arise during the implementation or audit process. When a nonconformity is identified, the organization must undertake a root cause analysis to understand the fundamental reasons behind its occurrence. This analysis is crucial for developing effective corrective actions that prevent recurrence. For instance, if a nonconformity relates to inadequate due diligence on a third-party agent, a root cause analysis might reveal that the process for risk assessment was not clearly defined, or that training on the due diligence procedures was insufficient. Simply addressing the symptom, such as redoing the due diligence for that specific agent, would not prevent future occurrences. The true root cause, such as a systemic gap in the procedure or training, must be identified and rectified. This might involve revising the procedure to explicitly detail risk assessment steps, or implementing mandatory refresher training for all personnel involved in third-party engagement. The goal is to move beyond superficial fixes to address the underlying systemic issues that led to the nonconformity, thereby strengthening the overall anti-bribery management system. Question 17. An organization transitioning to ISO 37001-2016 is reviewing its monitoring and measurement activities for the anti-bribery management system. They have collected data on the number of due diligence checks completed for third parties, the frequency of anti-bribery training sessions delivered, and the number of reported suspicious transactions. To effectively evaluate the system's performance and identify areas for improvement, which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of Clause 9, 1 of ISO 37001-2016? Option A, conducting a retrospective analysis of all past bribery investigations, regardless of their outcome, to identify any potential systemic weaknesses without considering current control effectiveness. Option B, correlating the number of due diligence checks with the absence of reported bribery incidents and analyzing training completion rates against a benchmark of industry best practices to assess the effectiveness of preventative controls. Option C, primarily focusing on the sheer volume of due diligence reports generated and the total hours of training delivered, assuming higher numbers equate to a more effective system. Option D, measuring the cost savings achieved by reducing travel expenses for third-party meetings, attributing any decrease in bribery incidents directly to this cost-cutting measure. The correct answer is B, correlating the number of due diligence checks with the absence of reported bribery incidents and analyzing training completion rates against a benchmark of industry best practices to assess the effectiveness of preventative controls. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to establish processes for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation of the anti-bribery management system's performance. Clause 9, 1 of the standard, monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, mandates that the organization determine what needs to be monitored and measured, the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation needed to ensure the validity of the results, when monitoring and measuring should be performed, and when the results should be analyzed and evaluated. The effectiveness of the anti-bribery policy and controls, the achievement of anti-bribery objectives, and the overall performance of the system are key aspects to assess. This includes evaluating the results of risk assessments, the effectiveness of implemented controls, the outcomes of due diligence processes, and the reporting of potential bribery incidents. Analysis and evaluation should inform decisions regarding the system's improvement and ensure its continued suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness in preventing and detecting bribery. The results of these activities are crucial inputs for management review and corrective actions, ensuring the system remains robust and compliant with the standard and relevant legal frameworks such as the UK Bribery Act or the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Question 18. When an organization with an established ISO 9001-2015 quality management system seeks to implement ISO 37001-2016, what is the most strategic approach to leverage the existing framework for a smooth and effective transition? Option A. Develop a completely separate and independent anti-bribery management system, ensuring no overlap with existing quality management documentation or procedures to maintain distinct compliance. Option B. Integrate anti-bribery controls and risk assessments within the existing ISO 9001-2015 QMS processes, capitalizing on the shared high-level structure and established management system principles. Option C. Focus solely on adding new clauses to the ISO 9001-2015 manual that specifically address bribery prevention, without revising or integrating existing quality-related processes. Option D. Primarily conduct external training for all personnel on ISO 37001-2016 requirements, assuming that a strong quality culture will automatically translate into effective anti-bribery practices. The correct answer is B. Integrate anti-bribery controls and risk assessments within the existing ISO 9001-2015 QMS processes, capitalizing on the shared high-level structure and established management system principles. Explanation. The transition to ISO 37001-2016 from a pre-existing ISO 9001-2015 quality management system, QMS, offers significant opportunities for integration due to shared principles and structural elements. ISO 37001-2016, like ISO 9001-2015, is based on the high-level structure, HLS, also known as Annex SL. This common structure facilitates the integration of multiple management systems. Clause 4 of ISO 37001-2016, context of the organization, requires understanding the organization's needs and expectations of interested parties, which aligns with Clause 4, 1 and 4, 2 of ISO 9001-2015. Clause 5, leadership, mandates top management commitment and policy, mirroring ISO 9001-2015's leadership requirements. Clause 6, planning, which includes actions to address risks and opportunities, directly relates to ISO 9001-2015's Clause 6. 1. Clause 7, support, covering resources, competence, awareness, communication, and documented information, has strong parallels with ISO 9001-2015's Clause 7. Clause 8, operation, outlines the implementation of anti-bribery processes, and Clause 9, performance evaluation, requires monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, similar to ISO 9001-2015's Clause 9. Finally, Clause 10, improvement, which includes nonconformity and corrective action, aligns with ISO 9001-2015's Clause 10. Therefore, leveraging the existing ISO 9001-2015 QMS framework, particularly its HLS compliance and established processes for risk assessment, leadership engagement, and continual improvement, provides a robust foundation for implementing an ISO 37001-2016 anti-bribery management system, making the transition more efficient and effective. The primary benefit lies in the ability to integrate the anti-bribery policies and controls within the existing quality management framework, rather than establishing a completely separate system. This integration can streamline documentation, audit processes, and management review activities. Question 19. Following a thorough internal investigation prompted by credible allegations of facilitation payments made by its international sales team, a multinational corporation operating in jurisdictions with stringent anti-corruption laws such as the U.S. FCPA and the UK Bribery Act, is assessing the potential fallout. Beyond the immediate legal penalties and fines, what represents the most comprehensive and potentially long-lasting impact on the organization's overall health and operational viability? Option A. The immediate suspension of all international trade activities until a comprehensive review of all global supply chains is completed. Option B. A significant and sustained erosion of market capitalization and a protracted period of diminished investor confidence, coupled with a substantial increase in the cost of capital. Option C. the mandatory divestiture of specific overseas subsidiaries implicated in the bribery scheme, leading to a reduction in global market presence. Option D, the imposition of a fixed, one-time fine by regulatory bodies, which is then fully amortized over the next fiscal quarter. The correct answer is B, a significant and sustained erosion of market capitalization and a protracted period of diminished investor confidence, coupled with a substantial increase in the cost of capital. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to reevaluate and potentially enhance their existing anti-bribery controls. When considering the consequences of bribery, particularly in relation to the standard's emphasis on due diligence and risk assessment, a critical aspect is understanding how various jurisdictions impose penalties. For instance, the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, allows for significant corporate penalties, including fines that can be a percentage of the profits gained from the corrupt act or a fixed statutory amount. The UK Bribery Act also imposes substantial penalties, with unlimited fines for companies and up to 10 years imprisonment for individuals. These legal frameworks often dictate the financial repercussions. Beyond direct fines, organizations face considerable indirect financial costs. These include the expense of internal investigations, legal fees, the cost of implementing remediation measures to comply with the standard, and potential debarment from government contracts. Reputational damage is another severe consequence. A bribery conviction or even an accusation can erode customer trust, deter potential investors, and make it difficult to attract and retain talent. This loss of goodwill can translate into significant long-term revenue decline, often exceeding the direct financial penalties. Therefore, a comprehensive understanding of the multifaceted consequences, encompassing legal penalties, direct and indirect financial impacts, and severe reputational damage, is crucial for effective anti-bribery management system implementation and ongoing compliance. The question probes the most encompassing consequence, which is the combined effect on financial standing and public perception, often leading to a sustained erosion of market value and operational capacity. Question 20. When an organization is transitioning to ISO 37001-2016, and has identified potential opportunities to strengthen its anti-bribery controls through emerging technologies, while also facing risks associated with third-party intermediaries in emerging markets. Which of the following approaches best addresses both the identified risks and opportunities in alignment with the standard's requirements for managing risks and opportunities? Option A. Implement a dual strategy that involves integrating advanced due diligence technologies for third-party vetting and developing proactive engagement protocols for intermediaries in high-risk markets, alongside a program to explore and pilot innovative anti-bribery solutions. Option B. Allocate resources exclusively to address the highest priority bribery risks, deferring the exploration of new technologies or market opportunities until the core risks are fully contained. Option C. Primarily focus on strengthening existing due diligence processes for all third parties and ensuring strict adherence to current regulatory mandates to mitigate identified risks. Option D. Conduct a one-time risk assessment and implement a set of standardized anti-bribery policies and procedures across all operational units, without further proactive engagement with emerging trends. The correct answer is A. Implement a dual strategy that involves integrating advanced due diligence technologies for third-party vetting and developing proactive engagement protocols for intermediaries in high-risk markets, alongside a program to explore and pilot innovative anti-bribery solutions. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to proactively identify and address risks and opportunities related to bribery. Clause 6. 1. One of the standard mandates that an organization shall determine opportunities and other situations that arise from the potential for bribery to take the action to address them. This involves considering how the organization can leverage opportunities to improve its anti-bribery posture and mitigate potential negative impacts. Specifically, identifying opportunities might involve exploring new markets with robust compliance frameworks, developing innovative anti-bribery training modules, or forming strategic partnerships with organizations that demonstrate strong ethical conduct. Conversely, addressing risks involves implementing controls to prevent, detect, and respond to bribery. The question asks about the most effective approach to addressing identified risks and opportunities, focusing on a forward-looking and integrated strategy. Option A proposes a comprehensive approach that combines preventative measures, detection mechanisms, and continuous improvement, aligning with the holistic nature of an anti-bribery management system. This includes not only implementing controls, but also actively seeking ways to enhance the system and capitalize on positive developments. Options B, C, and D represent more limited or reactive strategies that do not fully encompass the proactive and integrated approach required by the standard for both risk mitigation and opportunity maximization. For instance, focusing solely on reactive measures or only on compliance with minimum legal requirements misses the strategic advantage and enhanced resilience that can be gained from proactively managing opportunities. Question 21. When undertaking the transition to an ISO 37001-2016 compliant anti-bribery management system, what is the primary strategic benefit of embedding robust anti-bribery clauses within contracts with third-party intermediaries operating in regions with a documented high risk of bribery, as per the principles of Clause 7? 1. 2. Option A. To ensure that all financial transactions with third parties are conducted through secure, encrypted channels to prevent unauthorized access and potential bribery attempts. Option B. To gain preferential treatment in contract negotiations by demonstrating a strong commitment to ethical business practices, thereby reducing the overall cost of third-party services. Option C. To establish clear reporting lines for any suspected bribery incidents, ensuring that all such allegations are promptly escalated to the relevant law enforcement agencies without internal review. Option D. To create legally enforceable obligations for third parties to comply with the organization's anti-bribery policy and provide mechanisms for auditing compliance, thereby mitigating inherent risks. Correct answer is D. To create legally enforceable obligations for third parties to comply with the organization's anti-bribery policy and provide mechanisms for auditing compliance, thereby mitigating inherent risks. Explanation. The transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to establish and maintain anti-bribery controls, including those embedded within contractual relationships. Clause 7. 1. Of the standard specifically addresses due diligence on persons doing business with the organization, which extends to third parties. When reviewing contracts with potential business partners, especially in high-risk jurisdictions or sectors, an organization must assess the likelihood of bribery risks being introduced or facilitated through the contractual terms. The inclusion of clauses that mandate adherence to the organization's anti-bribery policy, require specific compliance certifications, or permit audit rights related to anti-bribery practices are crucial preventative measures. These contractual stipulations serve as a mechanism to enforce anti-bribery expectations and provide recourse should a breach occur. For instance, a contract with a customs broker in a country known for high levels of petty corruption might include a clause that explicitly prohibits the payment of facilitation payments, defines what constitutes a bribe, and grants the organization the right to terminate the contract and seek damages if such activities are discovered. This proactive approach, by integrating compliance requirements directly into contractual agreements, strengthens the overall anti-bribery management system by extending its reach to external parties and establishing clear lines of accountability. The due diligence process, as outlined in the standard, informs the specific content of these contractual clauses, ensuring they are tailored to the identified risks. Question 22. When transitioning an existing anti-bribery framework to align with ISO 37001-2016, what is the most critical consideration for developing the ABM's communication strategy to ensure effective stakeholder engagement and system adoption? Option A. Developing a comprehensive library of anti-bribery training materials that are exclusively delivered through a mandatory online portal for all employees. Option B. Prioritizing the dissemination of detailed technical specifications of the ABMs to external audit bodies to demonstrate compliance readiness. Option C. Focusing solely on top management pronouncements regarding the ABM's transition to underscore the organizational commitment. Option D. Establishing clear, two-way communication channels that convey the purpose of the transition, specific changes to policies and procedures, and provide mechanisms for feedback and clarification across all relevant internal and external parties. The correct answer is D. Establishing clear, two-way communication channels that convey the purpose of the transition, specific changes to policies and procedures, and provide mechanisms for feedback and clarification across all relevant internal and external parties. Explanation: the transition from an older standard to ISO 37001-2016 necessitates a robust communication strategy. Clause 8.2 of ISO 37001-2016, communication, mandates that the organization shall determine the need for internal and external communication relevant to the anti-bribery management system, ABMS. This includes what to communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, how to communicate, and who is responsible for communicating. The effectiveness of an ABM is significantly influenced by the clarity and reach of its communication. When considering a transition, the organization must inform all relevant stakeholders about the changes, the rationale behind them, and the expected impact on their roles and responsibilities. This ensures buy-in and facilitates a smoother adoption of the new or updated system. A key aspect is ensuring that communication is two-way, allowing for feedback and addressing concerns. For instance, communicating the revised due diligence procedures for third parties requires clear instructions for procurement teams and the legal department, along with a channel for them to report any implementation challenges or ambiguities. Similarly, informing employees about updated policies on gifts and hospitality necessitates a clear explanation of the new thresholds and reporting mechanisms. The communication plan should also consider the organization's structure, geographic distribution, and the diverse needs of its workforce and external partners. This proactive and comprehensive approach to communication is fundamental to the successful implementation and ongoing effectiveness of the ABMS, especially during a transition period where awareness and understanding are paramount. Question 23. During an internal audit of a multinational corporation's anti-bribery management system transition to ISO 37001-2016, the auditor identified that the organization's primary objective was to reduce instances of bribery. While this is a desirable outcome, the auditor questioned its suitability for guiding specific improvement actions and measurement during the transition phase. Considering the requirements for setting objectives in ISO 37001-2016, which of the following represents a more appropriate and actionable anti-bribery objective for an organization in this scenario? Option A. Develop and implement a comprehensive risk assessment framework for all business units by the end of the fiscal year. Option B. Ensure all employees complete anti-bribery training modules annually. Option C. Foster a culture of ethical conduct throughout the organization, as evidenced by a 10% reduction in reported ethical concerns within 2 years. Option D. Increase the percentage of high-risk third parties undergoing enhanced due diligence from 85% to 95% within the next 12 months. The correct answer is D. Increase the percentage of high-risk third parties undergoing enhanced due diligence from 85% to 95% within the next 12 months. Explanation: the establishment of anti-bribery objectives under ISO 37001-2016 requires careful consideration of the organization's context, risks, and commitment to integrity. These objectives must be measurable, aligned with the anti-bribery policy, and contribute to the overall effectiveness of the management system. When transitioning from a previous system or establishing a new one, an organization must ensure that its objectives are not merely aspirational but are actionable and auditable. Clause 5.2 of ISO 37001-2016, policy, mandates that the policy shall include a commitment to improve the anti-bribery management system, which directly influences the setting of objectives. Clause 6.2, objectives of the anti-bribery management system and planning to achieve them is paramount. It requires that objectives be established at relevant functions and levels, be consistent with the anti-bribery policy, and be monitored and communicated. Crucially, it states that when planning to achieve objectives, the organization shall determine what will be done, what resources will be required, who will be responsible, when it will be completed, and how the results will be evaluated. Therefore, an objective focused on enhancing due diligence procedures for third parties, which are a significant risk area, by increasing the percentage of high-risk third parties undergoing enhanced due diligence from 85% to 95% within 12 months, directly addresses a key control mechanism and is measurable, time-bound, and aligned with the policy's intent. This approach ensures that the objective is specific, relevant, and contributes to the system's overall risk mitigation. Question 24. When an organization is transitioning to ISO 37001-2016, how should its existing third-party due diligence framework be reevaluated to align with the standard's risk-based approach, particularly concerning the mitigation of bribery risks? Option A. The due diligence intensity and frequency must be adjusted based on a documented risk assessment of each third party's operating environment, business activities, and relationship with public officials, ensuring controls are proportionate to identified risks. Option B. All third parties, regardless of their operational context or potential for bribery exposure, must undergo a standardized, comprehensive background check process to ensure absolute compliance with the standard. Option C. Due diligence procedures should be solely determined by the legal and regulatory requirements of the organization's primary country of operation, with minimal consideration for the specific risks posed by individual third parties. Option D. The primary focus of due diligence should shift to verifying the financial solvency of third parties, as this is considered the most significant indicator of potential bribery involvement under the standard. The correct answer is A. The due diligence intensity and frequency must be adjusted based on a documented risk assessment of each third party's operating environment, business activities, and relationship with public officials, ensuring controls are proportionate to identified risks. Explanation: the transition from an older standard or a less formal anti-bribery approach to ISO 37001-2016 requires a robust risk assessment process. This process involves identifying potential bribery risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and then evaluating these risks to determine appropriate controls. Clause 6.1 of ISO 37001-2016 mandates that the organization determine risks and opportunities related to bribery and the effectiveness of existing controls. Specifically, when considering the transition, an organization must assess how its current due diligence procedures for third parties align with the requirements of ISO 37001-2016, which emphasizes a risk-based approach. This means that the depth and frequency of due diligence should be proportionate to the identified bribery risk associated with the third party. For instance, a high-risk third party operating in a jurisdiction known for corruption and involved in significant financial transactions would require more extensive due diligence than a low-risk third party providing minor services in a low-risk environment. The transition requires an evaluation of whether the current due diligence process is sufficiently granular to differentiate these risk levels, and whether the controls applied are adequate to mitigate the specific risks identified for each category of third party. This often involves reviewing existing due diligence questionnaires, background check procedures, and ongoing monitoring mechanisms to ensure they are calibrated according to the risk-based principles of ISO 37001-2016. Question 25. When an organization is transitioning to the ISO 37001-2016 standard for its anti-bribery management system, what is the primary objective of the activities undertaken to understand the organization and its context as stipulated in Clause 4.1 of the standard? Option A. To develop a comprehensive list of all potential bribery risks, regardless of their likelihood or impact. Option B. To establish specific performance indicators for the anti-bribery management system before any implementation occurs. Option C. To identify external and internal factors that could influence the organization's ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the anti-bribery management system. Option D. To document all existing anti-bribery policies and procedures to ensure compliance with the new standard. Correct answer is C. To identify external and internal factors that could influence the organization's ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the anti-bribery management system. Explanation: the transition from an older version of a management system standard to a newer one, such as moving to ISO 37001-2016, requires a thorough understanding of the organization's current state and its operating environment. Clause 4.1 of ISO 37001-2016, understanding the organization and its context, mandates that the organization determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction, and that affect its ability to achieve the intended results of the anti-bribery management system. This involves identifying factors that could either help or hinder the organization in preventing, detecting, and responding to bribery. These factors can be social, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, or competitive in nature, and they can originate from within the organization, e.g., organizational culture, resources, processes, or from its external operating environment, e.g., regulatory landscape, market conditions, stakeholder expectations. By systematically analyzing these issues, an organization can better establish the scope of its anti-bribery management system, identify potential risks and opportunities, and develop appropriate controls and strategies to manage bribery risks effectively. This foundational step is critical for ensuring the relevance, adequacy, and effectiveness of the entire management system, especially during a transition period where the new requirements might necessitate significant adjustments to existing practices. Question 26. When an employee in a procurement role at a global manufacturing firm, which is undergoing transition to ISO 37001-2016, declares a potential conflict of interest because their sibling is a significant shareholder in a key supplier company, what is the most appropriate immediate action for the organization's compliance department to take, in alignment with the standard's principles for managing conflicts of interest? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the declared conflict, evaluate its potential impact on procurement decisions and the anti-bribery policy, and implement appropriate controls, such as enhanced oversight or temporary reassignment of duties related to that supplier. Option B. Record the declared conflict in the employee's personnel file and schedule a review of the situation for the next annual compliance audit. Option C. Inform the employee that such relationships are generally discouraged and advise them to avoid any direct involvement with the supplier in question, without further formal assessment. Option D. Immediately suspend the employee's procurement responsibilities and initiate an internal investigation to determine if any preferential treatment has already occurred. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the declared conflict, evaluate its potential impact on procurement decisions and the anti-bribery policy, and implement appropriate controls, such as enhanced oversight or temporary reassignment of duties related to that supplier. Explanation. The transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to implement and maintain an anti-bribery management system. A critical aspect of this system is the management of conflicts of interest, which can create opportunities for bribery. Clause 8. 3 of the standard specifically addresses conflicts of interest. It mandates that the organization should identify and manage potential conflicts of interest that could compromise the anti-bribery policy or its implementation. This involves establishing procedures for employees to declare potential conflicts and for the organization to assess and mitigate these conflicts. The effectiveness of such management hinges on clear communication, robust reporting mechanisms, and consistent application of policies. The question focuses on the proactive measures an organization should take when a potential conflict of interest is identified, aligning with the preventative and risk-based approach of ISO 37001. The correct approach involves immediate assessment and the implementation of controls to prevent any actual bribery or undue influence. This is not about simply recording the conflict, but actively managing its implications for the anti-bribery system. Question 27. When an organization is transitioning its existing anti-bribery framework to align with the requirements of ISO 37001-2016, which of the following initial actions is most critical for ensuring a systematic and effective implementation process? Option A. Appointing a dedicated anti-bribery compliance officer without defining their specific responsibilities or authority. Option B. Immediately revising all existing procurement policies to incorporate stricter due diligence measures for third parties. Option C. Launching an organization-wide training program on the new ISO 37001-2016 standard without prior assessment. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive gap analysis to benchmark current anti-bribery practices against the ISO 37001-2016 clauses. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive gap analysis to benchmark current anti-bribery practices against the ISO 37001-2016 clauses. Explanation. The transition from an older standard or no formal system to ISO 37001-2016 requires a comprehensive review and update of existing anti-bribery controls. Clause 10 of ISO 37001-2016, improvement, mandates that the organization continually improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the anti-bribery management system. This includes assessing the results of audits and reviews, evaluating any changes in circumstances, and identifying opportunities for improvement. When considering the transition, an organization must first understand its current state, including any existing policies, procedures, and controls related to bribery prevention and detection. The gap analysis is a crucial first step in this process, identifying areas where the organization's current practices fall short of the ISO 37001-2016 requirements. Based on this analysis, a strategic plan for implementing the standard is developed. This plan would typically involve revising policies, developing new procedures, providing training, and establishing new controls. The effectiveness of these implemented changes is then monitored and measured. Therefore, the most critical initial step in transitioning to ISO 37001-2016, after understanding the standard's requirements, is to conduct a thorough assessment of the current anti-bribery posture against the standard's clauses to identify any deficiencies. This gap analysis directly informs the subsequent planning and implementation phases, ensuring that the transition addresses the most significant areas of risk and non-compliance. Without this foundational step, the transition process would lack direction and could lead to inefficient resource allocation and incomplete implementation. Question 28. During the transition phase of establishing an ISO 37001-2016 compliant anti-bribery management system, an organization is defining the structure for ABM's oversight. Considering the standard's emphasis on leadership commitment and the practical need for operational management, which approach best reflects the assignment of responsibilities and authorities for the ABMs? Option A. Assigning the entire responsibility for the ABMs to the Internal Audit Department, as they are responsible for compliance monitoring, without specific delegation of authority for proactive system development. Option B. Empowering the Human Resources Department to manage all aspects of the ABMs, including policy development, risk assessment, and training, with minimal input from other departments. Option C. Designating a senior executive, such as a chief compliance officer or a senior legal counsel, to be the primary ABM's representative with the authority to oversee implementation and report directly to the board, while ensuring other relevant personnel understand their specific anti-bribery obligations. Option D. Relying solely on top management to directly manage all ABM's activities, without delegating specific roles or authorities to any individual or committee. The correct answer is C. Designating a senior executive, such as a chief compliance officer or a senior legal counsel, to be the primary ABM's representative with the authority to oversee implementation and report directly to the board, while ensuring other relevant personnel understand their specific anti-bribery obligations. Explanation. The transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires careful consideration of how roles, responsibilities, and authorities are assigned within an organization's anti-bribery management system ABMs. Clause 5.2, Leadership and Commitment, and Clause 5.3, Policy, mandate that top management establish, implement, and maintain an ABMs. However, the standard also recognizes that the day-to-day operationalization and oversight of the ABMs require specific individuals to be designated with clear mandates. Clause 5.2, Roles, Responsibilities, and Authorities, explicitly states that top management shall ensure that the responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles are assigned, communicated, and understood within the organization. This assignment is crucial for effective implementation and continuous improvement. While top management retains ultimate accountability, delegating specific ABMs functions to a designated representative or committee is a common and effective practice. This representative typically acts as the primary point of contact for the ABMs, coordinates its implementation, monitors its effectiveness, and reports to top management. The selection of this individual should be based on their understanding of the organization's operations, their ability to influence decision-making, and their commitment to ethical conduct. The key is that the designated person has sufficient authority to drive the ABM's initiatives and ensure compliance, without necessarily holding the highest executive title. This ensures that the ABMs is not merely a top-down directive, but is actively managed and embedded within the organizational structure. The transition process involves identifying these roles, defining their scope, and ensuring that the individuals appointed possess the necessary competence and authority to fulfill their obligations, thereby fostering a robust anti-bribery culture. Question 29. An organization is transitioning to ISO 37001-2016 and is evaluating a potential joint venture with a foreign entity. This potential partner has a documented history of engaging in facilitation payments in their home country, a practice that, while not explicitly illegal under all local statutes, is considered ethically dubious and potentially a precursor to bribery by many international standards, including those implicitly supported by the spirit of ISO 37001. The organization's internal audit has identified this historical practice during its due diligence. Considering the principles of ISO 37001-2016, what is the most critical ethical consideration that the organization must address before proceeding with the joint venture? Option A. Verifying that the potential partner has obtained all necessary permits and licenses for their operations in their respective jurisdictions, regardless of their historical payment practices. Option B. Documenting that the potential partner has no outstanding legal judgments against them for any form of corruption, even if the facilitation payments were not formally prosecuted. Option C. Ensuring the potential partner's historical facilitation payments do not conflict with the organization's established anti-bribery policy and its commitment to integrity, requiring a thorough ethical risk assessment of the proposed business relationship. Option D. Confirming that the potential partner's financial statements are audited by a reputable international accounting firm, ensuring transparency in their financial dealings. The correct answer is C. Ensuring the potential partner's historical facilitation payments do not conflict with the organization's established anti-bribery policy and its commitment to integrity, requiring a thorough ethical risk assessment of the proposed business relationship. Explanation: the transition to ISO 37001-2016 requires organizations to reassess their existing ethical frameworks and controls in light of the standard's specific requirements for preventing, detecting, and responding to bribery. Clause 4.2 of ISO 37001-2016 mandates that an organization shall determine the extent of its commitment to preventing bribery and shall establish an anti-bribery policy that is appropriate to the purpose, context of the organization, and promotes an anti-bribery culture. This policy serves as the foundation for all subsequent anti-bribery activities, and considering the ethical implications of business dealings, particularly in jurisdictions with differing legal and cultural norms, an organization must ensure its policy and practices align with the principles of integrity, proportionality, and transparency, as well as the specific prohibitions against offering, giving, soliciting, or accepting bribes, whether directly or indirectly. The principle of due diligence in Clause 7.1.2 is critical here, requiring organizations to assess bribery risks associated with third parties. This assessment must extend beyond legal compliance to encompass the ethical reputation and conduct of these parties. Therefore, a scenario where a potential partner has a history of questionable business practices, even if not legally proven to be bribery, necessitates a rigorous ethical evaluation to ensure alignment with the organization's anti-bribery policy and its commitment to upholding high ethical standards in all business dealings. This proactive ethical assessment, driven by risk and the organization's commitment to integrity, is paramount in preventing bribery and maintaining a robust anti-bribery management system. Question 30. Consider a scenario where an employee of Global Trade Solutions reports a suspected bribery incident involving a senior manager. Following the report, the employee is reassigned to a less desirable project with reduced responsibilities. Which aspect of the ISO 37001-2016 anti-bribery management system is most directly compromised by this action, assuming the report was made in good faith? Option A. The effectiveness of the organization's due diligence processes for third parties. Option B. The completeness of the organization's risk assessment methodology for bribery opportunities. Option C. The organization's commitment to non-retaliation against whistleblowers. Option D. The adequacy of the organization's internal audit procedures for financial transactions. The correct answer is C. The organization's commitment to non-retaliation against whistleblowers. Explanation: The core principle of a robust whistleblowing procedure under ISO 37001-2016 is to ensure that individuals reporting potential bribery are protected from retaliation. Clause 8.7 of the standard explicitly addresses this, emphasizing the need for mechanisms to report concerns without fear of reprisal. This protection is fundamental to encouraging the reporting of unethical behavior, which is crucial for the effective functioning of an anti-bribery management system. The standard requires the organization to establish and maintain confidential reporting channels, ensuring that the identity of the reporter is protected to the extent possible, and that no adverse action is taken against them for making a report in good faith. This commitment to non-retaliation is a cornerstone of fostering a culture of integrity and transparency, enabling the organization to identify and address potential issues proactively. It also aligns with broader legal and ethical frameworks that protect whistleblowers.